Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I'm speaking to something very historic, that being the Budget Implementation Act for the largest and most anticipated Liberal deficit budget in Canadian history. Now, usually when history is being made, there are those that will be remembered well and those who will not be. And judging by this budget, it is clear that the current government will not be well thought of by future generations. These generations will be the ones tasked with the consequences of this massive Liberal deficit budget, one that will mean higher taxes than what we pay today, less services, higher inflation, and bigger debt servicing costs. Now, all these factors will vary based on the policy choices that are made in the years to come, but as a whole, they represent a much higher likelihood that future generations will not be as well off as folks today. Now, I know how hard my great-grandparents and my grandparents worked to make this country as strong and prosperous as it is today. They sacrificed through 2 world wars and a depression, building their families while keeping our country's finances under control. More recently, I think of my parents' generation, who sacrificed so much in the late 80s and the early 90s when the last Liberal government came to drastically cut spending and services for Canadians, while leaving their tax burden the highest in Canadian history to date. All of these sacrifices are at threat of being made in vain because of the lack of fiscal accountability and responsibility shown by this Liberal government over the past 5.5 years, and particularly in their new plan for future years. We are facing unique challenges, and the Liberals have proven in this budget that they are not up to dealing with them. The fact is, we can't count on the factors that previous generations did to make and keep our country prosperous. There is no post-war baby boom around the corner. The steady flow of skilled immigrants to this country is likely to tail off in the near future as the rest of the world wakes up to the demographic aging crisis and the implications of mass population decline. Fewer and fewer productive taxpayers will be around to service the ever-increasing annual deficits and debts. Many of the commodities and goods that have made Canada an economic powerhouse are at risk of being phased out by the policies of the World Economic Forum and our own Liberal government. Goods like oil, automobiles, and minerals are at risk of facing drastic reductions in production because of the demand-destructive policies implemented by woke governments. Even with the growth in electric vehicles, the scarcity of necessary raw materials like copper, cobalt, and lithium, among others, will make these transportation solutions less accessible for working families. With Liberal legislation like Bill C-69 from the previous Parliament, it is unlikely that we will even get new mines permitted in time to benefit from any green commodity booms, making us beholden to foreign global competitors like China, who will set prices for our consumers and control market supply. The confluence of factors that made our country prosperous, a young population, high immigration, fiscal responsibility, and increasing consumption of resources has been inverted. Now we have an aging population, out-of-control debt, soon to be more limited immigration prospects, and now the resources that have made our country prosperous in the past are being phased out. Nowhere in this Liberal budget did I see a direct plan to address these challenges. It is a failure. On the environment, a significant part of this Liberal budget, I see other key failures. On the Natural Resources Committee, we are studying low carbon and renewable fuels. Now, I agree with the consensus that we need to do more in this area in order to be competitive economically and lower carbon emissions. I was interested to learn that the Liberals have launched a new tax credit to promote carbon capture, utilization, and storage. There's a big catch, however. On page 168 of the budget, the Liberals make clear that, quote, it is not intended that the investment tax credit will be available for enhanced oil recovery projects, end quote. This is a slap in the face to my constituency. It basically means don't bother applying Alberta and Saskatchewan. It will significantly undermine investment in carbon capture, where it is already effectively used in my riding at the Sturgeon Refinery, where they have sequestered over 1 megaton of carbon dioxide in under a year. We could create tens of thousands of jobs and produce the lowest emissions diesel in the world, but the Liberals have essentially barred them from accessing this tax credit. It is out of line with our trading competitors in the U.S., where under the Q45 policy, a more limited tax credit is available for enhanced oil recovery producers. Why are the Liberals turning their backs yet again on the energy industry of this country, especially when they are taking the important step of decarbonizing their operations with expensive investments in carbon capture? Is the real reason because the Liberals cannot stand to see a successful, sustainable hydrocarbon industry in this country? That is the only reason I can see, and it is shameful. Shameful because it exposes that the Liberals are not really interested in finding the most cost-effective solutions for carbon emissions. They are only interested in looking for solutions that come from groups that aren't interested in working with our oil and gas sector. The government claims they are not picking winners and losers in this industry, but their actions speak differently. Now, I am proud that under a Conservative government, we will support carbon capture across all industries, regardless of whether they are engaged in enhanced oil recovery or not. And under the Conservatives, our emissions will be significantly lower while growing jobs in our oil and gas sector. Now, I'm over halfway through my speech, and I haven't even mentioned the government's failure during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, we all recognize Canada's going through a tough time. We have been in and out of lockdowns for over a year now, and it's taking a huge toll on families and small businesses. And that is exactly why, over the past year, the Conservatives have supported the government by allowing them to pass massive income support measures on an expedited basis. Now, we trusted that the Liberals would take that goodwill and do the job right, or at least if they did the job wrong the first time, make it right as soon as possible. Well, unfortunately, they did the opposite. They have used this pandemic and the political logjam in this parliament to govern as if they had a majority, threatening a snap election in a health crisis rather than working with opposition parties to do what is best for Canada. And you can see it in question period on a daily basis. Our basic questions are met with disgust. Ministers not even bothering to listen to the questions and choosing to throw around unparliamentary language, accusing the opposition of lying or misleading Canadians. They have no interest in hearing constructive criticism or implementing our proposals for positive change. For example, let's look at the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. In theory, it's a great program aimed at protecting jobs and our economy. Yet, as I read through the company quarterly reports that we're reading, I am shocked by how many profitable businesses have been using taxpayer dollars delivered on a silver platter by this Liberal government to pad their bottom lines. Many of these companies took these benefits while laying off hundreds of workers, yet the Liberals put no strings attached and no accountability for these businesses. Now, I read in the budget, the Liberals got a big solution for this. They will claw back the wage subsidy for companies that raise executive pay. I thought it was a joke. These companies are spending billions on share buybacks, dividends, and the Liberals are saying, oh, well, if they raise executive compensation, we'll claw it back. It's laughable. It's a feast for big business and government relations executives put on by the Prime Minister, and the taxpayer foots the bill. Now, we need to chart a new course, maximizing growth in the years to come, while returning to fiscal responsibility by setting a clear plan to get our country back to a balanced budget and address the rising debt load and face the challenges of tomorrow. We faced them before, like in the 2008 financial crisis. Under Conservative leadership, this country came out stronger than ever. And we are ready to do the hard work to get our country back on track to secure our future. Now, in my short time to speak today, I've raised serious problems with the Liberals' economic mismanagement, whether it be their poorly designed programs or their programs designed to outright exclude important industries and regions in this country. I have highlighted some deeply concerning trends, such as the threat of a reduced population, lower immigration, an aging population. These are challenges that would be difficult for governments to face even at the best of times. And what we have seen from this Liberal government is that they have a willingness to spend whatever it takes to get reelected, rather than spending to face the challenges of the future today. And it is clear that only a Conservative government can get our country back on track and secure our future. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Longueuil-Saint-Hubert.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I listened to my honorable colleague who talked about what the Conservative government would do once it's in power. I would remind him that we're in a public health crisis, but there's also a social crisis. I've met with organizations involved with homelessness in Montreal and in Longueuil, my riding, and people are very concerned. They're talking about the negative outcomes for the next 5 to 6 years because of the public health crisis. When the Conservatives come to power, would the Conservative government commit to dealing with this serious housing crisis that we're experiencing? We see tent cities all over Canada, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver. Can the Conservatives commit in the face of this serious social crisis before us?
Member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the member for that question, and he's absolutely right. The pandemic, may end. The health crisis may end in the next few months. I certainly hope it does. But the mental health crisis and the other consequences of this nearly 18-month pandemic will be felt for years, if not generations, to come. And so when we look at the federal deficit picture, we have to take into account that just because we get out of this pandemic doesn't mean that the economy's going to recover overnight. And it's going to take strong leadership that is going to put targeted economic support where it needs to be. And a lot of that economic support is going to be on important social initiatives, like addressing homelessness. And we as Conservatives, I'm very proud of our team, talking about implementing a 3-digit number to address mental health challenges. We passed a motion in this House months ago. We did. What have the Liberals done? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Conservatives will get the job done. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
And comments, the honourable member for Kingston and the Islands.
Well, that's fascinating, Madam Speaker, because the member went on talking about how we were spending too much money and the debt and deficits that's been piling on. And then in response to a first question, his default answer was, we need to spend more money. Other Conservative members keep coming out here saying, we need more for Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. We need more for this. He even just said himself in his response to the last question that we need to spend money on social programs. So rather than talking about where we do need to spend money, can the member please suggest from this budget where he thinks we need to remove money? That might be an easier way for the Conservatives to look at it. Where should we take money out of this budget?
Member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
With pleasure, Madam Speaker. For example, how about not giving billions of dollars in wage subsidies to profitable companies engaged in share buybacks and dividend increases? Wow, we could have saved a few $1 billion for Canadians there. How about the hundreds of millions of dollars that has been sole sourced to Liberal insiders during this pandemic? Oh, we could have saved a few $100 million there, Madam Speaker. So, you can give me lots of examples. I could do this all day, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
The honourable member for Chatham-Kent-Leamington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank my colleague for his excellent speech. Earlier this morning, I challenged a Bloc colleague as to his concern about inflation that's being fueled by this budget, by this implementation measure. I want to ask my honourable colleague, what are his concerns regarding inflation? I know the members across the way accuse us as Conservatives as being concerned. Guilty.
The honourable member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Well, I'm worried, Madam Speaker. I'm worried about inflation. And if it wasn't bad enough, the spectre of inflation, what worries me more is the fact that this Liberal government doesn't seem to be concerned about inflation. They bring out some economists, it's a mixed bag, and they say, oh, inflation's not a big deal, inflation's not a big deal. Well, I'm 30 years old, and I've never really lived in an economy where we had inflation. But I can talk to my grandparents and my parents, and the idea that the savings account in your bank, the value of that money going down every day as this government continues to print money, overheat the economy, and it's like seniors, fixed income. The threat to our country is real. When is this government going to take concrete action?
Ministre du débat, l'honorable député de Berthier-Masquinongé.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much.